Episode 151. Harry! Hermione! Yelled Ron, waving the silver Quidditch cup in the air and looking quite beside himself. We did it! We won! They beamed up at him as he passed. There was a scrum at the door of the castle, and Ron's head got rather badly bumped on the lintel, but nobody seemed to want to put him down. Still singing, the crowd squeezed itself into the entrance hall and out of sight. Harry and Hermione watched them go, beaming, until the last echoing strains of Weasley is our king died away. Then they turned to each other, their smiles fading. We'll save our news till tomorrow, shall we? Said Harry.
Yes, all right, said Hermione wearily. I'm not in any hurry.
They climbed the stone steps together. At the front doors, both instinctively looked back at the forbidden forest. Harry was not sure whether it was his imagination or not, but rather thought he saw a small cloud of birds erupting into the air over the treetops in the distance, almost as though the tree in which they had been nesting had just been pulled up by the roots. Chapter 31. Owls. Ron's euphoria at helping Gryffindor scrape the Quidditch cup was such that he could not settle to anything next day. All he wanted to do was talk over the match, and Harry and Hermione found it very difficult to find an opening in which to mention Gropp. Not that either of them tried very hard. Neither was keen to be the one to bring Ron back to reality in quite such a brutal fashion. As it was another fine, warm day, they persuaded him to join them in studying under the beech tree on the edge of the lake, where they stood less chance of being overheard than in the common room. Ron was not particularly keen on this idea at first. He was thoroughly enjoying being patted on the back by Gryffindors walking past his chair, not to mention the occasional outbursts of Weasley is our king, but agreed after a while that some fresh air might do him good. They spread their books out in the shade of the beech tree and sat down while Ron talked them through his first save of the match for what felt like the dozenth time. Well, I'd already let in that one of Davy's, so I wasn't feeling that confident, but I don't know. When Bradley came toward me just out of nowhere, I thought, you can do this. And I had about a second to decide which way to fly, because he looked like he was aiming for the right goal hoop. My right, obviously, his left. But I had a funny feeling that he was fainting, and so I took the chance and flew left. His right, and, well, you saw what happened, he concluded modestly, sweeping his hair back quite unnecessarily so that it looked interestingly windswept, and glancing around to see whether other people nearest, a bunch of gossiping third-year Hufflepuffs, had heard him. And then, when Chambers came at me about 5 minutes later— What? Ron said, stopping mid-sentence at the look on Harry's face. Why are you grinning? I'm not, said Harry quickly, looking down at his transfiguration notes and attempting to straighten his face. The truth was that Ron had just reminded Harry forcibly of another Gryffindor Quidditch player who had once sat rumpling his hair under this very tree. I'm just glad we won, that's all. Yeah, said Ron slowly, savoring the words. We won. Did you see the look on Chang's face when Ginny got the snitch right out from under her nose? I suppose she cried, did she? Said Harry bitterly. Well, yeah, more out of temper than anything now. Ron frowned slightly. But you saw her chuck a broom away when she got back to the ground, didn't you? Said Harry.
Well, actually, no, Ron, said Hermione with a heavy sigh. As a matter of fact, the only bit of the match Harry and I saw was Davy's first goal.
Ron's carefully ruffled hair seemed to wilt with disappointment. You didn't watch? He said faintly, looking from one to the other. You didn't see me make any of those saves?
Well, no, said Hermione,
stretching out a placatory hand toward him.
But, Ron, we didn't want to leave. We had to.
Yeah, said Ron, whose face was growing rather red. How come? It was Hagrid, said Harry. He decided to tell us why he's been covered in injuries ever since he got back from the Giants. He wanted us to go into the forest with him. We had no choice. You know how he gets. Anyway, the story was told in 5 minutes, by the end of which Ron's indignation had been replaced by a look of total incredulity. He brought one back and hid it in the forest? Yep, said Harry grimly. No, said Ron, as though by saying this he could make it untrue. No, he can't have.
Well, he has, said Hermione firmly. Grop's about 16 feet tall, enjoys ripping up 20-foot pine trees, and knows me as Hermie.
Ron gave a nervous laugh. And Hagrid wants us to teach him English. Yeah, said Harry. He's lost his mind, said Ron in an almost awestruck voice.
Yes,
said Hermione irritably, turning a page of intermediate transfiguration and glaring at a series of diagrams showing an owl turning into a pair of opera glasses.
Yes, I'm starting to think he has. But unfortunately, he made Harry and me promise.
Well, you're just going to have to break your promise, that's all, said Ron firmly. I mean, come on. We've got exams, and we're about that far from being chucked out as it is. And anyway, remember Norbert? Remember Aragog? Have we ever come off better from mixing with any of Hagrid's monster mates?
I know. It's just that we promised, said Hermione in a small voice.
Ron smoothed his hair flat again, looking preoccupied. Well, he sighed, Hagrid hadn't been sacked yet, has he? He's hung on this long. Maybe he'll hang on till the end of term and we won't have to go near Grop at all. The castle grounds were gleaming in the sunlight as though freshly painted. The cloudless sky smiled at itself in the smoothly sparkling lake. The satin green lawns rippled occasionally in a gentle breeze. June had arrived, but to the fifth years this meant only one thing. Their ordinary wizarding levels were upon them at last. Their teachers were no longer setting them homework. Lessons were devoted to reviewing those topics their teachers thought most likely to come up in the exams. The purposeful, feverish atmosphere drove nearly everything but the owls from Harry's mind, though he did wonder occasionally during potions lessons whether Lupin had ever told Snape that he must continue giving Harry occlumency tuition. If he had, then Snape had ignored Lupin as thoroughly as he was now ignoring Harry. This suited Harry very well. He was quite busy and tense enough without extra classes with Snape. And to his relief, Hermione was much too preoccupied these days to badger him about occlumency. She was spending a lot of time muttering to herself and had not laid out any elf clothes for days. She was not the only person acting oddly as the owls drew steadily nearer. Ernie Macmillan was developing an irritating habit of interrogating people about their study habits. "How many hours do you think you'll do in a day?" he demanded of Harry and Ron as they queued outside herbology, a manic gleam in his eyes. "I dunno," said Ron. "A few. More or less than 8? "Less, I suppose," said Ron, looking slightly alarmed. "I'm doing 8, said Ernie, puffing out his chest. 8 or 9. I'm getting an hour in before breakfast every day. 8's my average. I can do 10 on a good weekend day. I did 9.5 on Monday. Not so good on Tuesday, only 7.25. Then on Wednesday—" Harry was deeply thankful that Professor Sprout ushered them into Greenhouse 3 at that point, forcing Ernie to abandon his recital. Meanwhile, Draco Malfoy had found a different way to induce panic.